Underwater levels. Nobody likes them in any platformer, but I've dedicated my entire life to making my own version of the original Super Mario Bros. In Unity, so I don't have a choice. First up, I drew the swimming sprites for Mario and made the game flip between them. And then it was actually making Mario swim, and the way that I did this was by lowering the gravity a bunch and allowed Mario to swim upwards at any point, whether he was touching the ground or not. This made it feel quite groovy and, dare I say, fluid, but it didn't quite feel like you were actually underwater. The original game has these green blocks and pink coral, so drawing these quickly in Photoshop was pretty easy, and now it's time for some death, also known as fish. Mario fish are one of my favourite characters of the Mushroom Kingdom. They are just so round and squishy. I just want to squish them. But when I put them in the game with some very simple movement, they felt super rigid and static and not squishy. Step 1. Animations. We're just scaling and rotating the fish in different directions to give it that squishy sort of vibe. Step 2. Trigonometry. As I'm sure most of you are aware, this is just a straight line, and straight lines do not have the squish factor. Instead, we can use a sine wave to make the fish follow a curve instead, so it's a bit more realistic. Each of the fish's movement is a little bit randomized as well, so each of them look a little bit different, which I think is nice. The movement and animations definitely add to that underwater vibe, though we only have two types of fish. There's the green one, which just goes to the left infinitely, and there's the red one, which goes back and forth. I talked about this in the last devlog, but New Super Mario Bros. For the Wii is just so nostalgic for me, and they have these purple spiky fish which just directly target Mario and chase him down. So let's make it. Drawing it wasn't too bad, but the movement is obviously pretty different. The first thing that I did was use some pretty simple maths to find the angle between the fish and Mario, then some code would rotate the fish in that direction, and since it's always moving forward, it basically has the effect that it's just following Mario. So yeah, dead set bonds are made. So far, this underwater aesthetic is actually really chill, which is definitely a nice change of pace from all of the chaos that I'm used to. Also this happened. So yeah. Another enemy that floods me with nostalgia are these sea urchins. How can you not just drown in cuteness at these funny little guys? In my opinion, a very nice addition to the game. But this made me realise that the underwater levels in Mario just aren't that exciting. Sure, they got some new enemies, but most players are just looking forward to when it's over. And that ain't good game design, and that's why I wanted to add the frog suit from Mario 3. Of course, I drew the power up and Mario sprites first and then put it into the game. This is pretty straightforward since I've already done it with the mushroom and fire flower. It looks so stupid. I love it. The main point of the frog suit is that you get way more control when swimming, and this was much easier than I thought it would be. Whenever Mario is in FORG mode, he no longer becomes affected by gravity. Instead, his moveset turns pretty much into a top-down sort of thing, being able to move in any four directions, and this is much more fun to swim around in, and plus the animations are just so funny. I love them. I also drew these underwater spikes and made a really tight maze because I just hate myself or something, I don't know. This reminds me of the dumb Mario Maker levels that just make you want to implode whenever you start them. But yeah, moving on, it's squid time. The way that bloopers move is that they sort of chase down Mario, but instead of moving directly towards him, they do little hops. So first, I had to determine whether Mario was to the right or left of the blooper, and I actually used maths for the first time in my life. How crazy is that? I used something called the dot product with the vector between the blooper and Mario, and one completely horizontally. And this would allow me to get a number between -1 and 1. This was great because then I could actually start moving the enemy around, but of course this is just half of the movement. I switched on gravity for the blooper but set it at a really low level so it looked like it was just floating downwards. Eventually it'll leap in a direction that is both facing upwards and the direction that Mario is relative to itself. Whenever it jumps, it'll also save Mario's Y position, and then it'll jump again whenever it reaches it by falling back down. This movement is wildly different from the actual game, and I don't really know why I made it like this. Anyway, since this is a horror game, I wanted the squids to sort of jump out and jump scare you. I don't know where I possibly got this idea from, but here's how I did it. When the bloopers are hiding, they have absolutely no movement code, but they do constantly check out in front of them. If Mario ever swims through this line, it'll alert the blooper to jump out in the same direction, and then the AI kinda just goes back to the normal blooper. Sometimes game dev doesn't need to be confusing. If you can do things a simple way, that's usually better than doing it complex. Then again, I have no idea what I'm doing. So you remember them spiky boys that we made in the last episode? The really cute ones that I love? Yeah, so when you put them in water, they turn into these things called spiny eggs. I'm not even kidding. I put this into the game, and to begin with, they didn't really do a lot. They just bobbed up and down in the water, and this was obviously exhilarating gameplay, but what is neat is that they propel their spikes in the 4 cardinal directions, and then does the same thing but in the diagonals. A really simple movement pattern, but it was pretty fun to dodge these bullets, and it just gets super chaotic when you add too many. It is time for more fish. We got the dry bones fish, which is sort of like a combination between the red fish, which moves back and forth, but whenever it sees Mario, it turns into the purple spiky fish and chases him down. Since I had the code from both of these enemies, I whacked them together and got something that somehow worked pretty well. It constantly checks out in front of itself for Mario, and if it sees him, it's hunting time. But why are we calling it dry bones if it's underwater? We should probably be calling it wet bones. Wait, no, hold up.